It's about that time.
And welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to our segment, What's Cooking, with State Rep Michelle Cook. Good evening, Michelle.
Good evening, my friend. And how are you tonight?
It's hot.
Oh, it is hot.
It's hot.
That's all right. We could use the warm weather. Get people outside and get them moving.
Well, considering it's officially or unofficially the start of summer, let's be honest. The coronavirus situation has kind of put a damper on the party.
Well, though, I think it's all in how you look at it, right? So we recognize that May 20th was the beginning of Reopen Connecticut. Although it's not moving as fast for some folks, and maybe for other folks, it's moving too fast. I think that it gives us the opportunity to take time and still enjoy the pace that we've been at, spend time with our family, enjoy the outdoors, take a hike, walk your dog. Although, I think the dogs are overly walked by this point. And also now that you have the opportunity to go dine outside, gives us the opportunity to get out there and support our local businesses that are having the opportunity to do dining outside. You could still do takeout and delivery, but it's not as doom and gloom as I think that, what everybody really feels. Our beaches are, more open than what they were 2 weeks ago. Our parks are still open, and I think that as we start to see things move, you're going to start seeing other things happen. And that's just vitally important for our social, emotional, and, physical and mental health.
Be that as it may, I'm still feeling that people are feeling a lot of anxiety.
I agree with you.
That they normally would not be feeling at this time of the year. So, with that being said, your rosy perspective on this situation, I think helps, because I know you're not just spinning it, but you're being objective in terms of looking at the larger landscape. And now that we have a little forward motion going forward in terms of bringing businesses back and whatnot, how do you evaluate the job that's being done in assessing those issues that are making people anxious?
I think that there's going to be anxiety until we get a resolution to the COVID. And I don't think that goes away overnight, obviously. And I don't know if that goes away this year. But I think that if we all just take a deep breath and have patience with each other and recognize that people are trying to do what's right, I think that it alleviates some of that. I don't think that all of that angst is going to be alleviated until we truly understand the definitives on where the COVID-19 came from, why it spreads as fast as it does, how it spreads. Exactly, because we know that the CDC has kind of gone like this on all of the things that they're telling us. And at the end of the day, I think that there's some common sense things that we all really need to continue to focus on. Wash your hands. Don't touch your face with your hands if you're using them. If you're out in public, be respectful of people's space. And these are things that we probably should have always been doing all along. But me, I'm a hugger. I'm a very social person when it comes to greeting folks. That's that Midwestern girl in me. And it's very hard to take that step and not give those greetings that we're so used to. But at the same time, I think that it does make you realize that what we've always taken for granted, we can't. And the fact that the most hardest hit folks are our most vulnerable population, which I think that we knew all along. But I don't think that we were necessarily as prepared in our nursing homes and elder care facilities as we should have been. And And so I think that that's where we really still have a lot of angst and uncomfortableness. Our hospitals are open for business. Our doctors' offices have not stopped working. Our dentist offices, we didn't close them, so I think that there's some misunderstanding in that regard. We have to be diligent, and we have to be aware of where somebody's concerns might be and respect them. And at the same time, if we go through this together and try not to be afraid, but to be aware, I think that makes really a huge difference in how we get through this together as a community.
Be that as it may, Michelle, how is this affecting the budget? And
I think that we haven't seen all of what's going to affect the budget as of yet, given the fact that there's a lot of things that we've put in for expenditures, local and statewide, that we will be able to get back from the FEMA reimbursements due to the pandemic and a national health crisis. So,
are you sure about that?
Well, I know that that's the way that is supposed to go. And we have a list. I have requested the list from our local municipality to see what they've requested for reimbursement. We're collecting that at the state level to ensure that those reimbursements are channeled and followed through appropriately. And at the same time, we have to ensure that our state puts all the, they're very good about that. We have those folks that's their job. And then we have great congressional delegation to ensure that the money that is owed to us will come back to us. But, to bring it to state level specifically, we haven't changed the budget from last year to this year at the state level. So all of the municipal aid that was coming down is still coming down. We haven't altered that at all. And primarily because we are very well aware of the uncertain times, that we did not want them to feel the effects of what might have been. We were very diligent in our last budgetary session to not raid that rainy day fund, where there was proposals to raid the rainy day fund and to spend that to fix our roads and our infrastructure. We pushed back on that and said, no, we really need to have a good rainy day fund. And we had some, little over $900 million in there, which makes us in a much better position than other people that might not have had that there.
I hate to interrupt you.
Yep.
When you say we fought back on that, who we are you referring to?
So I would say that if in this we conversation, it was the Democrats at the state house, whether it be the House or the Senate, that really pushed back on not using the rainy day fund for filling that void on infrastructure. We have to come up with a substantiated plan to fix our roads, bridges, and other infrastructure to make sure that they're safe for the longevity. And just raiding a rainy day fund to piecemeal that does not solve our problem at all. That's why you have the conversation about tolls, to figure out what's sustainable and guaranteed revenue and income.
And I didn't ask that question, to disparage one party.
No, it's fair.
But that type of legislation, what committee is working with how you deal with those budgetary concerns that are being created from the virus?
So, what'll end up happening, obviously right now, we are not in session. We can be called back to special session and figure that out. But when the gavel comes down in January, that is going to be a 2-year budgetary session, right? So you'll have an election in November, and then you put people back in office, or you put other people back, put people in office. And those are the groups of folks that are really going to start hammering down and making those decisions. Does that mean that it has stopped now? Absolutely not. I know that I'm a member of the Women's Caucus, and we have subdivided ourselves up to look at specifics. I've asked to be on the Nursing Home and Human Services working group to ensure that I can oversee some of those things and bring some suggestions and ideas to the table. This is just what us as women have decided to do and say, hey, look, we need to not sit idle. We need to start working yesterday to prepare for what's coming down the pipe. It's going to be innovative ideas like that will be able to come back to the table, give suggestions to the governor's office, give suggestions to the leadership, and then figure out what we need to do. Do we need to go back in, July, August, September, October, November, December? Do we need to go back in and codify some things to make things solid and confirmed? Or do we have enough revenue right now to be able to move through this session to this year and then start back in January to really work on another 2-year budget as we do every 2 years? I think that's something that has not yet been decided, because I don't believe that we have seen final numbers, and nor will we see final numbers at this point, as to what COVID is going to cost us as a state, or a country at this point.
Well, you got some interesting challenges ahead of you, Michelle. But the one thing that I will say that I do like with the governor's administration is his grassroots approach to government. He seems to be very keen on using the digital apparatus that's out there to connect people. And I think that that's a smart thing to do. And in a state like the size of Connecticut, that type of process, should be, effective in terms of communicating his proposals and getting good feedback from the public.
And you make a great point. There's an app that was introduced a few weeks ago, and I'm drawing a blank on it, and shame on me for that, because I wasn't even thinking about it. That you can log on and update your health. Every day, if you have symptoms, if you're healthy, if you feel great, if you don't feel good, trying to really get a handle on what the symptoms and the spread is looking like of COVID. Another way that they're using the social media and technology to get a handle on this COVID pandemic and what it looks like. What is the true situation out there? The fact that they are giving out daily updates, maybe not once, sometimes twice, sometimes 3 times a day, on things that are forever evolving when we talk about moving the state forward, what's happening, what's going to change, what might not change, what do we need to do to be prepared? The ability for folks to sign up to get free PPE if you're having if your business is really in need. They're doing thermometer hands out for businesses. I don't think that we can say enough about the communication, whether you agree or disagree with the administration. I believe that the administration has done yeoman's work in keeping us attuned and abreast of the situations as they're happening. We might not like everything that's coming out. We might not agree with it all, but I don't think that there's anyone out there that can say that things have been governed behind the doors when we talk about communication and information.
I agree with you on that, although I think there were some PR situations that came up that kind of didn't help the governor in terms of how he positioned himself on the COVID-19. And let's be honest, it's a shame that this is being politicized. And
you hit on something that's really been bothering me all day today, and I've talked about it a few times with a variety of different people. This is a pandemic. Whether you believe it or not, whether you want to accept the fact that we have a virus out there that we can't get a handle on or not, to each his own. But we have to respect the fact that none of this should be political. We shouldn't be trying to use that in a sense that says, oh, because you're a Democrat or because you're a Republican. Like it's much bigger than that. I understand that people liken, the lives that have been lost tragically to this virus, to the fact that, we lose those amount of lives with the flu every year. But I think what we are short sight of, and I read something the other day where it says that on 9/11, the tragic day that made us stand still, we lost 3,000, give or take, lives, right? A little over 3,000 lives. We've lost much more than that with COVID, but yet we're pushing back and arguing about what's our constitutional freedoms and rights. And I think that we really need to take a step back and recognize that this is also making us stand still and pay attention. And we need to understand that it should not be about the Republican and Democrat conversation. It should be about the health and safety of our communities. And knowing that there's folks out there that are really trying to do what's right and give you the honest information.
I think because of this virus, we are exposing the underbelly of our culture in terms of the cavern of mistrust that exists. And unfortunately, this is a way where people who go into government can understand that there is no room for error.
Correct. That's, and I think that when you have something that's evolving as rapidly as this is, and CDC, like I said, they're doing this, with one day it's this and one day it's this and another day it's this and another day it's this. I think that it's twofold. And I think that just goes to show that this is a virus that nobody understands and they can't get their hands around. But you have a moral and ethical responsibility to be as honest and transparent and informative as possible. And you have to lead by example. And that is ultimately what will make us or break us.
But Michelle, I think an aspect of that has to be highlighted even more so. When you have a situation where the CDC are making their prognostications, based on scientific models, there's going to be at times some variance and volatility in how that plays out.
Absolutely.
But the cavern of mistrust that I'm talking about refers to, quote unquote, the swamp. It's corruption. And this is why I'm saying that people now who are going in or who are led or who feel moved to become involved in our government have to understand the high bar of integrity that you have to carry. And it's even more so now because there is that cavern of mistrust that somehow, some way has to be brought back together. And while this virus plays itself out, there has to be a bridging of that gap somehow.
Well, and I think that goes back to respecting each other, starting there, right? And don't get me wrong, you've known me well enough to know that I'm not a political basher. I find that my voice is better used in many other ways than it is to say, oh, well, this person's terrible or this person's terrible or this person's terrible. I think that folks really have an obligation to do the homework, but to dig into what the truth is. Don't believe it because you saw it online. Let's really have an honest conversation about what's going on. And then let's hold those folks accountable. And I think that that's really where we are here. The phrase draining the swamp is kind of wishy-washy for me, really, no pun intended. I just think that we've got to be better than that. There are good, bad in every arena. There's good and bad at the State House here. There's good and bad in DC. There's good and bad down the street. But it is about holding people accountable that makes this change effective in the way that I believe that you're looking for.
It has to happen.
Right.
And because people are believing that going into politics is a way to get rich.
Yeah, well, I have a huge problem with that. And if anybody wants to check, I do a financial statement every year. So that is not us here in this, or at least me here in the State House. We make a whole $30,000 a year. But,
the dark money that's involved in the process, though.
Oh, and you know what, Jacque? I've said it 1,000 times till I'm blue in the face. You start putting campaign finance like we do here in the state of Connecticut at the federal level, and that changes the game. Congressional folks should not have to spend 6 or 7 hours a day on the phone trying to raise money to stay in office. That is ludicrous. We elect folks to represent us and to get work done. We don't elect folks to be stuck in gridlock because it is a political banter back and forth. That gets us absolutely nowhere. And so in my world, I participate in campaign financing here in the state of Connecticut because it makes it honest. It makes it equal. And for those folks that don't participate in it, I just don't understand. We fill out forms and you can find out who's donated to everybody's campaign, and you can't take any more than $270 per person from no business. And if you're giving more than $100, that has to be done in a personal check. I can't call up, you fill in the blank business and say, could you drop me $100,000 so I could win this seat? We have a max amount being able to spend on our campaigns, 30 grand. And then if we wait too late, it's less than that. If we did that at the federal level, or if we did that in every state across the United States, you would see a totally different dynamic when you talk about campaigning. And when you talk about who's being held accountable and how they're being held accountable. Because I know what it's like to have the Koch brothers drop $7,000 or $8,000 when my opponent was running against me a couple of years ago and try to backdoor me to get me out of office. That's just some shady stuff that I don't like. I think that if you're doing this legally and on the up and up and for the right reasons, it shouldn't matter. And if we would take big dark money out of politics at the federal level, it's a game changer.
Well, it starts flowing down, and that's when it gets to be insidious. And as you just mentioned, you perfectly understand the dangers of that process. But nonetheless, Michelle, as we wind down this segment here, give us an update on some of the things that are going on in the community that you think our audience might want to partake in.
Well, so we are doing the food drives at the Torrington High School every Friday from 12 to 3, 12 to 4. Last week we stopped at 3 because it was a holiday weekend. Tomorrow, I don't know when we're airing, so it's very hard for me to say tomorrow. But on Wednesday, we have been doing produce drop-offs at the middle school. So if anybody has questions when they hear this to find out if those produce drop-offs are happening on the Wednesday after they hear this, shoot me a message over Facebook or send a message to my state email, and I will give to you all the information that you need for those and the times and information. I do put that up regularly. So we're doing those kind of things. And I know that all of our community outreach nonprofits, Fish, Salvation Army, Friendly Hands, the Soup Kitchen, our homeless shelters and a variety of other folks, they are all still in need. People that traditionally would have never gone hungry are going hungry. I'm in constant contact with Karen down at Friendly Hands. We drop stuff off to Lisa at the Soup Kitchen regularly. I know that Salvation Army was a little bare the other day. And Fish, we drop stuff off there on Friday. And, it looks like they have a good supply. But if you have 80 or 90 families come in that are in need of food, that supply goes away in an instant. And those drives on Fridays at the high school, that stuff stays right here in town. I know that the social workers at the high school have been working with students that have families of need and identifying them, and we're helping those families as well by either doing pickup or drop off of food. I did last week, dropped off boxes of produce to one of the senior housing complexes in town, and I will be doing that again tomorrow. And I will do that again as every opportunity knocks, because I think that often our seniors that are in those senior housing complexes are often forgotten because they don't have transportation or they're not comfortable getting on a community bus. And maybe not everybody does Meals on Wheels. So, if anybody's looking to help out in those regards, I'm happy to help too and connect some of those dots. And if people are out there looking to get involved past now and into the future, I went and did my CERT certification, the Community Emergency Response Training. So anytime that there is an emergency in town and that organization needs to be called in for volunteers, those folks that have CERT certification are put on a volunteer list. It's very easy. Right now you can do the online portion. It takes a couple, 2 or 3 hours and a 15-question quiz at the end. And then way after pandemic is done, Chief Towie will do some in-classroom stuff to get everybody completely whole at the CERT certification, but they need volunteers. And it's just another way that you as an individual can give back to your community in a variety of different manner at any given time. They'll call, put you on an email list and see if you have time to volunteer.
It's about that.
That's
time.
very cool, Michelle. As always, thank you so much. Keep up the great work. and we'll look forward to our next segment of What's Cooking.
Absolutely.
Take care and give your family the best for me.
I will, my friend. Thank you.
City.